Cuba receives tons of humanitarian aid from Bolivia. For the fourth consecutive day, firefighters battled one of the worst wildfires on Turkey's southern coast. In Hungary, thousands of healthcare workers demand wage increases and better work conditions. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm José Daniel López in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. The government of Bolivia has sent 20 tons of medical supplies and food to Cuba to face the United States economic and commercial blockade. The Minister of the Presidency of Bolivia, Maria Nela Prada, announced that the humanitarian aid was made on behalf of the Bolivian people as a promise of brotherhood made by President Luis Arce. Prada affirmed that the shipment seeks to control the blockade maintained by the United States government. The Caribbean island received in the last few days humanitarian aid from Mexico, Russia, Nicaragua, Vietnam, and Venezuela.
We are very grateful. Bolivia has always been one of our brothers. Nothing is too little. The small details make the big things. We have also done so at a time when the Cuban people are going through a complex situation, both from the epidemiological point of view as well as from the food point of view. We have received donations from other countries. We have looked for different distribution principles and criteria. We are informing our people where the products we receive are going. They are being received with much love and gratitude, and we are sure that we will continue to be repaid and very grateful for this gesture and well. The hours of flight will not be in vain. That same warmth that you feel here, that same warmth of humanity and solidarity, and we receive it with open arms in our country.
The Bolivian Minister of the Presidency, Maria Nela Prada, has said that the sending of food and health assistance to Cuba is based on the affection of the Bolivian people for the Cuban people.
2.5 toneladas de jeringas.
There are 2.5 tons of syringes, 16.5 tons of food, and 1 ton of biosecurity material, which, as I was saying, we bring with great affection. We have approved it through a supreme decree this past weekend in the presidential cabinet. It was an initiative of our brother president of the plurinational state of Bolivia, Lucho Arce, which of course has been accompanied with all our affection and love by the entire cabinet and by all the Bolivian people who are also joining this campaign of solidarity.
China has slammed the United States' interference in Cuba's internal affairs under the excuse of so-called freedom, human rights, and democracy, and urged Washington to end the blockade against the island. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Xiao Lijian stressed that the unilateral U.S. sanctions and blockade are the cause of the medical and energy shortages in Cuba and have seriously violated the Cuban people's rights to develop it. He stressed that the U.S. should follow the purposes of the UN Charter and the basic norms governing international relations and called for the international community to immediately lift the blockade against Cuba and stop its interference in the country. Colombia has seen an increase of almost 200% in forced displacements in the first half of 2021, according to the latest report by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. In June alone, there were 9 massive displacements of over 3,000 people in the departments of Antioquia, Nariño, and Cauca. Over 44,000 Colombians have been displaced so far this year as the country continues to see widespread violence by illegal armed groups and a lack of state protection for vulnerable communities. The situation is further aggravated by the impacts of natural disasters and the COVID-19 pandemic. A day after the inauguration, Peruvian President Pedro Castillo appointed Guido Bellido as his prime minister, described as a socialist, and indicated the possible direction of his government. Bellido is the general secretary of the Free Peru Party in the city of Cusco. He is indigenous Quechua and an economist by profession. According to reports, the appointment has shattered the hopes of Castillo's more centrist supporters. Thousands of locals gathered at the historical site of the Battle of Ayacucho, which sealed Peru's independence from Spain, to witness the swearing-in ceremony on Thursday, which was also attended by several regional leaders. A magnitude 6.1 earthquake shook the North Pacific coast of Peru on Friday, sending people fleeing from their homes and damaging a centuries-old church. The United States Geological Survey reported that the earthquake had an epicenter about 8 kilometers east of the city of Sullana and was also felt in southern Ecuador. Footage broadcast on local TV stations showed damage to part of the front of a 16th century cathedral in the city of Piura, where products in a supermarket were also shown scattered on the floor as a result of the tremor. Chile has seen a second day of mobilizations to demand the immediate release of political leaders arrested during the widespread anti-government protests of 2019. Protesters rallied in front of the National Institute for Human Rights in the capital Santiago to demand the immediate release of the mostly young prisoners keeping preventive detention without trial for almost 2 years. Relatives of those jailed called for the approval of a general pardon bill presented by opposition lawmakers, which has been pending in the National Congress for months. A national strike was called this Friday in El Salvador against the government of Nayib Bukele. The strike, supported by social movements, student organizations, and political organizations, comes on the same day as the annual student march to remember the massacre of students by the military dictatorship at the University of El Salvador on July 30, 1975. President Bukele now enjoys more power with a majority in parliament following February's legislative elections. Protesters voiced opposition plans to amend the constitution, the legalization of Bitcoin, the militarization of the country, and political persecution. 3 members of the Joint Task Force of Paraguay's army were killed in what has been described as a terrorist attack. Preliminary investigations indicated that a bomb exploded in the pad of a patrol vehicle in the northern part of the country, where the guerrillas of the Paraguayan People's Army are active. A task force spokesman said that the truck with only 3 crew members was accompanied by another truck with 6 soldiers who repelled further shots from the attackers. In a bid to strengthen domestic production in the face of U.S. sanctions, the Venezuelan government installed the Superior Council of the Economy this Friday. Seeking import substitution, the council brings together state and private productive sectors tasked with boosting national production in a country that is heavily dependent on imports, which have been severely restricted by the aggressive U.S. blockade policy. As a part of the initiative, the Center for National Productive Investment will complement the plans for economic recovery and growth first launched in 2016.
Venezuela is a country that, despite the aggression from the United States, despite the blockade and the theft of our assets abroad, despite all of this, Venezuela is economically stable in comparison with many other countries, and we are aiming towards gradual growth. All this despite the enormous sacrifice of our people and the critical affectations brought upon them by illegal and arbitrary United States sanctions.
Meanwhile, Venezuelan Vice President DELCY Rodriguez addressed the need to substitute imports in the country.
The most important impact, as we have already seen, is the economic asphyxiation in terms of foreign currency revenues for our country, which have fallen by 99%. This is a working meeting. We want to invite you to work. It is a meeting where we can reach agreements in a coordinated manner. The President spoke yesterday in his productive program about strategic import substitution. This is a call to the national productive sector, a strategic import substitution. Not everything can be substituted. You know that, we know that, and that's why we need to agree on the sectors to be substituted.
The Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro has seen an unusual cold snap, with at least 2 people reported dead and social movements warning of a potential humanitarian crisis for the homeless population. Charities and aid organizations pointed out that the cold temperatures could cause a health crisis due to the amount of homeless people and the lack of infrastructure to provide them with shelter. Volunteers say the harsh weather has hampered the distribution of supplies and hot food to those in need in a city that is used to tropical temperatures. More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. For the fourth consecutive day, firefighters battled one of the worst wildfires in Turkey's southern coast after the evacuation of dozens of villages and some hotels. 6 people have died and dozens have been taken to hospital. An investigation has been launched to determine if some of the fires were a result of arson. Health Minister Farshid Koçak said 400 people affected by the fires in Monava were released from hospitals and 10 were still receiving treatment. Turkey has blamed some of previous forest fires on arson of outlawed Kurdish militants. In Hungary, thousands of healthcare workers and their supporters have gathered in Budapest to demand wage increases and better work conditions. The crowd, which included supporters from some of Hungary's largest trade unions, said the COVID-19 pandemic had only worsened the already precarious situation of healthcare workers, while their demands for pay hikes and decreased working hours had been ignored by the government. Meanwhile, nurses say that while some workers had received increased benefits, they were not enough to offset poor pay and intense demands arising from the pandemic.
The Hungarian state spends very little on its healthcare system, so there is a lot that has to be done. Putting the healthcare system back on its feet must be one of the most important tasks of the next administration. The government should not be in a state of war with healthcare workers, but should jointly develop a system of wages and conditions which can keep healthcare professionals and doctors in the system.
Russia has called on Azerbaijan and Armenia to refrain from acts that could worsen tensions and reiterated its commitment to support the implementation of the agreements reached following recent clashes. A spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry noted serious concerns regarding the recent incidents near the Azerbaijani-Armenian border, expressing condolences to the families of those killed and calling on both sides to resolve all problems through political and diplomatic channels. Russia played a key role in negotiating the end of the conflict over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region last year and continues to work for the implementation of the bilateral accords reached then. In Finland, more than 300 hectares were consumed by a wildfire described by experts as the most devastating in the last 50 years. Authorities of the Scandinavian country reported that the fire occurred in a wooded area 500 kilometers north of the city of Helsinki. So far, the incident has not led to the evacuation of residents in the surrounding localities. The chief of fire operations say that around 250 people, including military personnel, are fighting the flames with the use of specialized helicopters to load large quantities of water. Around 400 homeless people who set up tents in affluent Paris areas to demand accommodation were evicted by the police. 90 of those who camped in the square were underage. In total, around 300 tents were installed in the famous Place de Bosage Square in a bid to shed light on the homeless issue. The action was organized by Conflict Recreations, which brings together several associations. The organization called for humane evictions and guarantees, including institutionally backed relocation. According to the French National Statistics Institute, the country has up to 3 million vacant homes, of which almost half are located in the region around the capital. And thousands have taken to the streets of Paris and other cities across France to protest against a new bill requiring people to have special COVID-19 passes to enter restaurants and other venues. There were tense scenes at times between protesters and special police forces in Paris, but no immediate reports of disturbances. The protesters also reject the mandatory COVID-19 jabs for health workers. The pass requires vaccinations and a quick negative test or proof of a recent recovery from COVID-19. On the other hand, French authorities justify implementing the health passes because the highly contagious Delta variant is making strong inroads in the country.
I am a nurse and I've resigned because I think we mustn't be blackmailed. I also think that we mustn't be told what to do, knowing that during the first wave we've been quite mistreated. And now, suddenly we are told that if we don't get vaccinated, it is our fault that people are infected. I think it is sickening, in fact.
It's a big hindrance to freedom. It's a hindrance to freedom if now we must have a virus pass to go to the groceries, go to the cinema, enjoy life after a grueling job. Workers are poorly paid today. The virus pass is a real danger for everybody. It's really an antisocial thing. So we are here to defend ourselves against all that.
Japan's coronavirus emergency grows as the Olympic Games continue. Authorities extended the state of emergency to 4 more areas, in addition to the Olympic host Tokyo, as COVID-19 cases spike in the capital and around the country, overshadowing the Summer Games. With the Delta variant of the coronavirus at large, the nationwide count of cases topped 10,000 for the first time on Thursday.
The virus infection is spreading at a rate we have never experienced before. The main reason for this spread is the new Delta variant, which is rampant across the globe.
Senegal is now facing an explosion of COVID-19 cases due to the spread of the Delta variant. In the capital, Dakar, hospital beds are full and health services are on the verge of collapse. The West African country has suffered a third wave of virus infections in recent weeks, with cases rising from a few dozen last month to about 1,700 in July.
The first campaign with Sinopharm and ASTRAZENECA, people still came out, but it's not like this time. Every day we reach 800, 850 people a day. At the beginning of the campaign, we were around 400, 450. We are all seeing the negative effects of this pandemic. All activities are stopped. The country's economy is affected. We count the death every day. Only the vaccine could allow us to resume our normal activities. People have to believe in it so that we can get out of it.
There are people who are not informed, who do not believe in this disease until now. The government must do something to go to the villages, deep into the country, to raise awareness among the population in Senegal. It is important.
In Kyrgyzstan, the government has received about 226,000 doses of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine through the COVAX mechanism. Authorities announced that they expect the arrival of another batch of immunizers with more or less than 2.3 million doses of AstraZeneca. Kyrgyzstan has a total of 161,000 infections from COVID-19 and more than 2,000 deaths from the disease, while some 400,000 people have been already immunized in the country. The Caribbean island of Martinique entered a new lockdown this Friday for at least 3 weeks to stem the alarming rise of COVID-19 cases. As a French overseas territory, the French government announced it will send a team of medical personnel and extra hospital beds. Visitors from France will be required to prove they have been vaccinated or have a compelling reason for travel. According to the latest data, Martinique has an incidence rate of more than 900 cases per 100 inhabitants. Its main health care facility, the University Hospital, has reached a saturation point.
It is something that is not avoidable, and there is only one answer. It is vaccination. We know it. So vaccinate yourself, vaccinate yourself. The new lockdown is a hassle for me. I think it's exaggerated. 3,000 asymptomatic cases, right? It's not 3,000 deaths or 3,000 sick people lying in hospital. Maybe they are doing it to prevent it, but for a year, more than a year, it's just too much. We are tired of it. It's time for it to end.
Let's take it as it comes, because there is no point of getting upset. There is no point. You have to follow the instructions, and that's it.
And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Shawad Khalid Awar is the third youngest Palestinian to be killed by Israeli fire in the West Bank over the course of this week. He was shot during a funeral of a Palestinian boy killed by occupation forces the previous day. 20-year-old Awar received bullets on the head and stomach as Israeli troops shot at Palestinians, expressing their anger over the killing of a 12-year-old Mohammed Al-Alami, who was shot by Israeli troops while traveling in a car with his father in the occupied West Bank town of Beit Umar, northwest of Hebron. Tunisian President Kais Saied has appointed a new security chief amid the political crisis in the country. Former National Security Advisor Rida Washau Lodi was named as interim interior minister in President Said's first major appointment since he froze parliament and seized executive powers early this week amid widespread protests and an economic crisis. The move was denounced by the country's biggest party as a coup, and clashes between protesters on both sides have erupted in recent days. Over 100,000 children are expected to suffer extreme and life-threatening malnutrition in Ethiopia's Tigray region, according to the United Nations report. 6 million inhabitants of Tigray are currently prevented from receiving humanitarian aid as shipments are blocked due to the ongoing conflict. According to the UN, intimidation, harassment, and the constant crossfire prevent aid convoys from delivering nearly 7,000 cartons of ready-to-eat food from UNICEF warehouses that could make the difference between life or death for thousands of children who are currently malnourished.
There are so many. We can't,
In order to reverse this nutrition, health, water, food security catastrophe will require a massive scale-up of humanitarian assistance. And that means that we must be allowed to conduct our work without hindrance. That means being able to access fuel, cash, telecommunications. It means being able to bring in the supplies that we need. And it means being able to conduct normal financial transactions. And that failing to meet these conditions could bring humanitarian assistance to a standstill.
Several hundred people have marched in Chad's capital against the ruling military junta. The opposition Transformers Party and civil society groups called the demonstration against the confiscation of power by the so-called Transnational Military Council that has ruled the country since the death of President Idris Deby in April.
A feeling of satisfaction. Satisfaction because we were able to march without any clashes taking place. We have demonstrated, as Max Loengard said earlier, we are mature, we are capable, we are responsible for carrying out a truly peaceful march, which, for once, we have been allowed to do. All the Chadians who came out are demanding justice for everyone. They are calling for a sovereign and inclusive national conference, not like the dialogue that excludes the majority of Chadians. Today, we feel that the CMT wants to stay in power forever, not for 18 months, but for 36 months and maybe for another 30 years.
The Afghan government is seeking to drive back the Taliban advance as foreign troops leave. Air raids killed 65 members of the Taliban and wounded a dozen others, according to the Afghan Defense Ministry. The raids were conducted in Lashkar-Gah, capital of Helmand province, in the south of the country region. The ministry also informed that over 200 Taliban fighters were killed recently and over 100 injured in operations conducted by the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces in several provinces of the country. After 20 years of fruitless intervention, the US and NATO are withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, and the Taliban has been making advances in recent control of the nation. In other news, Keidomar Vallenilla has won the second medal for Venezuela in the Olympic Games, Tokyo 2020, by obtaining the silver medal in weightlifting, 96 kilograms. Vallenilla started with 210 kilograms on his first attempt at the clean and jerk. However, this was more than enough to accumulate 347 kilograms, since he will fail his other two attempts of 215 and 216 kilograms. The 22-year-old athlete from Caracas joins his colleague Julio Mayora, who had been on the podium at Tokyo 2020 after winning silver in the 73 kilograms last Thursday. And with this, we come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories, as always, in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.